like to call its next witness?
The state calls James Casey to the stand.
Casey, you could, oh, he's not in here. Sorry, I thought he was. If you could please come forward and be sworn in by the clerk.
I swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God?
Yes, I do.
Whenever you're ready, Ms. Dahl.
Judge James, could you introduce yourself to the jury?
Good afternoon. My name is James Casey. I'm a retired Arizona Department of Public Safety state trooper.
James, you were shot in the face on October 8th of 2014, is that right?
That's correct.
Before we talk about what happened that night, let's talk about who you are. Tell us about your educational background and your professional background, sir.
Okay. I have 2 bachelor's degrees. I have a bachelor's degree in history. I have a bachelor's degree in sociology. I have a master's degree in criminology. Military, I was in the Air Force for 4 years. I'm an honorably discharged veteran. Police, in 2000, I went to the Agawam, Massachusetts Police Academy. I was hired by the city of Pittsfield, Massachusetts Police Department. It was a city police department. I worked there from 2000 until 2008. Half of my career was spent in the detective bureau. We were approximately 100 officer department. I've been the lead officer or case agent, as I call it here, in homicide. I did child and adult sexual assault. My first case was a $130,000 bank robbery, so I've done that as well. And then I did patrol. In 2008, I laterally transferred out to Arizona, and I was hired in the Arizona Department of Public Safety. From 2008 till 2013, I was assigned to District 6, which is a Southern Bureau, and that was Casa Grande. So I basically patrolled from the Southern Bureau of Maricopa County until the Northern Bureau of Pima County. All of Pinell County would be ours. I worked a lot in the Maricopa area, State Route 347 as well, I-8. From 2014 until I retired in 2018, I was in the Metro Highway Patrol Bureau in the night squad, the graveyard shift, and I was also, I'm sorry.
You said Metro, was that here in Phoenix, sir?
That's correct. I was Metro Central, which was basically our boundaries, if I recall, were State Route 51 to the east. We went up to the 101 to the north, down the 17, all the way to the transition, I believe that's the I-10, and then 10 from the 101 out to the Salt River Bridge. So we had quite an area. And I worked from 2000, which is 8 p.m., until 0600 or 6 a.m. was my shift. I believe the last year I was on the DUI squad, same shift.
Let's talk about what your responsibilities were as a DPS trooper. And we've used the term trooper, we've used the term officer. What's the right term? Okay,
so I've been referred as Officer Casey and Trooper Casey, and the reason for that is the previous administration, we were known as officers. So I was Officer Casey. The night that I was shot, I was Officer Casey. The current command staff, Colonel Milstead, Frank Milstead, who runs the DPS now, he changed our name to State Trooper or Troopers. So that's why I've been interchangeably referred to as Officer and Trooper. So my retired badge says Trooper, so Officer Trooper, it's synonymous.
Well, either way, what did you do to protect the roadways?
All right. Well, our main function in the highway...
I should say you don't protect roadways, you protect people. Is that fair?
Fair, yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. All right. Our main function in the highway patrol is obviously traffic enforcement. It varied in the two areas I worked, like in the Southern Bureau, Casa Grande area. One of the focuses was human trafficking, drug trafficking. So I'd stop cars and you could have, hundreds of pounds of marijuana in it. I've stopped cars. I believe the most I ever had was 24 people in a van, and they were illegal. And then when you get into metro area, the Phoenix area is obviously more of it's an urban area. So you're going to deal more with speed, DUIs, impaired drivers, road rage. I've arrested people who pulled guns on other cars and getting cut off. So, you just run the whole gamut when you're here in the metro area versus out in the rural.
On October 8th of 2014, were you working that shift you were talking about? It started at 8 p.m.?
That's correct, yes, I was.
During that period of time, had you been working with Trooper Cruz and Trooper Alfano for a period of time?
Yes, I had. As a matter of fact, Trooper Alfano and I, to go back even further, I met him probably in 2011 when we were talking about when I worked in the Southern Bureau, because I was District 6, Casa Grande. He bordered me on he was Gila Bend, District 4, so we actually responded to a collision on, that side of so that's why I met him. So yes, I've worked with both of Trooper Cruz and Trooper Alfano since basically 2014.
I want you to tell us about what happened that night, how it got to where we are today.
All right, so usually the way I did my shifts when I started is I would usually do all my paperwork in the beginning of the shift. At that time I had been on approximately 14 years, so I wasn't really gung-ho about going out and stopping people speeding. I figured I would do my work in the later part of the night. I loved doing more of the criminal work than I did the that part of it. So I did my paperwork as a matter of fact, at the closed Kmart, I-17 in Northern. I did it religiously. I worked Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights was my shift. So I was there at the beginning of the shift. I'd usually do my paperwork until somebody would send out a message on the computer and say we're meeting somewhere to go to lunch. That night we were going to Phoenix Children's Hospital, PCH, and we were meeting as a squad to have dinner or lunch or whatever we call it. But it was, I believe, about 1 a.m.
Is that typical for you guys to get together for lunch at different areas that are 24 hours?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because there's only so few, I should say, that you want to eat at. You feel, you can trust the food. So yeah, that's one of the few. At least in our area. I mean, I'm sure there's others outside, but we had to stay close to the freeway in case we got a call. So it's not like we could, go, it's too far off the grid, so to speak.
After you had lunch at 1 a.m., where did you go?
After we had lunch, I remember we all, that night we were double squatted, as has been said, which meant we had 2 squads on. Our squad was, that night, we were set to do paperwork, so we were the secondary squad. And I remember he testified here, Trooper Sean Roadcap. He was leaving for Australia that next morning. And I remember our Sergeant Alan Haywood, sent out an MDC, the computer message, mobile data computer. He had sent out a message and asked if somebody would stay out on the road to cover so Sean could go take care of all his paperwork before he left on vacation, because he's leaving for 3 weeks. And so I replied back, I'll take care of it, let them all go let him take care of paperwork. I'm caught up, I'll stay on the road with the other squad. So that was probably, my best guess would be about between 2 and 2:30 in the morning that night. So I made my way towards the I-17, and I remember it was probably 2:45-ish, between 2:45 and 2:50-ish. I had stopped a car. And the female that I had stopped, the driver, she had a warrant, but it was quashed. So, a quash warrant meant she had paid, she had either paid the fines or she had taken care of the warrant, basically. So I remember at one point dispatch asked me, and my call sign was Charles 325, Charles being that we were Metro Central. So Charles 325 was my call sign. She asked me if I was code 4. I mean, she was checking on me to see if that warrant was good and did I need anybody else. And I said, no, I'm code 4 because no warrant.
What is code 4?
Code 4 meant I was all set. I needed no help. I didn't need any additional help from dispatch, nor did I need any additional DPS units there. I was good. Basically the stop was done.
When you were in contact with that female during that stop, did you call for backup during that stop?
No, I very rarely called for backup, unless I had a need for backup. And I can explain. I've been a city.
I have to ask you a question.
Sure.
Not to interrupt you, but I have to. Sure. When would you call for backup? Was it routine for you to call for backup or not?
No. You know, as a state trooper, it's almost like taught to us. You don't want to be known as that person to call for backup every single time because, you know, so like I said, when you're down in those outlying areas outside of Metro, you might be the only one around. So you have to learn, you know, it's just a different mentality. I was a city cop. You know, a city cop, when I worked the midnight shift as a city police officer, the minute you got on the radio and called in a traffic stop, they would automatically start sending another unit. I mean, it just so city and highway patrol or state police are just different. So I had that. You just didn't call for backup if it wasn't needed. And, you know, I generally never called for backup unless I needed it.
After you were code 4 with the quashed warrant and the female you had contacted, what area were you in at that point?
Okay, so I don't remember the exact reason I stopped her, but I gave her a warning for whatever reason I stopped her. I know there was no enforcement action. I know it was just south of Indian School because after I took care of that, I exited the freeway I was heading northbound on I-17. And if you're not familiar with that, if you imagine the stack, I'm heading north of the stack. I'm going away from it towards Anthem, I guess would be. So I get off at I-17 at Indian School, and I get at the light, and I make a left to turn onto Indian School. I go over the overpass of the freeway, and as I'm coming up on it's starting to rain, and I look over and I see a Kansas-plated vehicle. Now it's 3 in the morning, give or take. It's early, but it's about 3 in the morning. As I'm getting closer to it, I put the plate number in my computer. As I was rolling up to, I slowed down enough to get the plate into my computer, so it was in my system. Because my first thought was that time of day, that's a very high crime area. I was thinking stolen car was my first thought. So as I pull up next to it, I noticed the driver's side and the passenger front window are both rolled down. And again, going back to my Casa Grande Highway Patrol, that's usually indicative of window tint violation. You know, when you see somebody roll by you in July and it's 115 degrees and they're rolling their, you know, just their driver's side windows roll down as they go by you. You know, I mean, who does that if you have, you know.
Now this was in October at 3 a.m.
And it's raining.
And it's raining. The front window was down, the passenger side window front was down. Were the driver's side rear and the passenger side rear windows down or up?
No, they were both up. So
what did you see next?
Okay, so as I pulled up next to the car, we got to the light. And when I looked over to see who was driving, I noticed it was a black female and an Hispanic female was sitting in the front passenger seat. And I think I stared at them, or I was just kind of glancing at them. I'm going to say 5 to 7 seconds. And I noticed not one time did anybody look over my way. It was like they were consciously trying to look straight and avoid me at all costs. And again, it raised my level of suspicion. It just didn't seem right because, you know, even me, and I'm a retired police officer, a police officer pulls up next to me, and you just glance over. I mean, I glance over who's next to me anyways, but for them to consciously make no effort and to have that window down and it's rolling, it raised my level of suspicion.
What did you do? Did you immediately conduct a car stop?
No, I did not.
Why not?
Well, what I did is they were in the left-hand turn lane to go left and to go south onto the frontage road, and I was set to go straight westbound on Indian School. And at that time in 2014, DPS, we had a policy that you could not pursue a vehicle for an equipment violation, and a window tint would be an equipment violation. So I didn't want to get behind them, and I didn't want to light them up immediately because I was afraid I would spook them and they would take off and head into the city and not go on the freeway, and then I wouldn't be able to stop the car. I would have had to let it go. So what I did is I went straight. I figured I'd let it commit to the freeway, or hope it did. If it went and turned side street, then, it beat me. But I went down to 27th Ave. I made a quick U-turn because there's very little traffic. And I got back onto the freeway. I didn't activate my lights, so I wasn't in pursuit or anything. I just got back onto the freeway. And I remember when I went under the Thomas underpass, I looked over and I saw the Kansas plated, the dark blue Kansas plated vehicle. And by now, I saw that the windows were up and the tint was limo tint. I knew it was too dark.
Now, were you going northbound or southbound on the I-17?
We're southbound now on the I-17. We just passed Thomas Road, so we're heading towards McDowell.
What did you do at that point?
When I got closer, I picked up a little speed. I looked over to confirm it was too dark. So when I did, I got in behind the vehicle, activated my emergency lights, and I conducted a traffic stop. The vehicle exited at McDowell, and the driver pulled into the Knights Inn parking lot.
At that point, what did you see and do? Before you even got out of your vehicle, did you do something?
Yeah, well, before we get out of the vehicle, on our computer, we can do one or two things. You can either go over the radio and let dispatch know you're out at that location on a traffic stop, or our computers, we could do it, the MDC. That was generally me. I tried to stay off the air, so I logged myself out at the Knights Inn, and that way dispatch knew where I was, and they knew I was on a traffic stop. So at that time, because I was suspecting window tint violation, as I was exiting my car, as we were exiting the freeway, I should back up. As I was exiting the freeway, I had my window tint meter, so I had taken it out and I placed it between my legs. So when I was exiting the car, I was putting it in my back pocket. So that way, if there's any question, on my citations or warnings, whatever I wanted, I would always list what the number was, so that way if I came to court, I could recall what it was.
So was that your practice?
Every time if I had a window tint violation, yes.
So in this case, you had your instrument with you. What did you do and see?
Okay, so I walked up to the vehicle and
on which side?
I went up on the driver's side. So the driver's side of the vehicle, I approached from the rear, and I just basically I just walked straight line from my car to the driver's side of the door, and the driver had her window rolled down. I observed that it was a black female, and I observed she was wearing she appeared very scantily dressed to me. It was a very small pink or white colored dress. And then I looked over in the other side and I saw that Hispanic female, basically the same two I saw that was at the red light just previous. And I asked the driver, Lori Richardson, I asked her for her license registration. And as she started reaching into her glove box, what caught my eye is, so if I'm staring at her down to the passenger or the driver's side rear, I saw a bunch of movement and I could hear something. So I told them to stop. And I said, get your hands up. And at that point, I told her to roll that window down so I could see. And she did. And I moved over and looked in. And I saw and they'd stopped. And I made everybody put their hands, well, I should say, I made the person sitting behind the driver, I made him put his hands on his knees. The person that was sitting in the middle, the female, a Hispanic female, she was wrapped up in a blanket like this. And how I know it is I could see her fingers clutching the blanket like this.
For the record, not judge, I apologize. For the record, the witness is crossing both forearms underneath his chin.
Okay. And then I saw another Hispanic male sitting, but he was laying on the windowsill. So if I may, I'll just demonstrate here. So if the judge is me looking that way, he's laying on the windowsill like this. And he appears to be asleep. He hasn't opened his eyes one time, anytime I've said that. So
you keep talking about the window. Which window did you ask Ms. Richardson or the driver to roll down?
The driver's side rear window, the two passenger side front and rear windows were still up. So they were never rolled down. So they were still up at this time.
What was it that caught your attention to make the individuals in the back seat show their hands?
Well, because the male that was sitting behind the driver, as I said to you, the female, she was wrapped up in a blanket, and he had his hands under that blanket, and I could not see what he was doing. One, because of the window, and I had that pillar, but B, his hands down where I could not see them made me very concerned. So that's why I said, let me see your hands. And, he quickly stopped, and he looked at me, and he put his hands on his legs, and that's when I had her roll the window down. So then I could look. And then because of the action, and again, the other thing too that again it was struck me as so odd is the female that was with the blanket was staring straight ahead, never looked, nobody was looking at me, and so based on everything, I asked the driver to take the keys out of the ignition and put them on top of the dashboard.
Did she do that?
Yes, she did. And in retrospect, I should have had her hand me the keys, and I would have put them on the top of the car. Why this is done? Just a pursuit prevention. You don't want them. You hope they don't take off on you. So that's mainly the reason for it.
Describe the blanket that the middle rear passenger had.
Sure. The best way I could describe it is if you've ever been on a plane, a bus, a train, anything like that, a cheap blanket. Not a comforter, not something you see on a bed, huge, but something like cheap that, is long but not real thick. A cheap blanket would be the way I would describe it.
Did the individual behind the driver's seat comply and put both of his hands where you asked him to?
He did.
And what about the woman who was next to him?
Well, she kept her hands in the blanket, so I could see her hands, so I really, that's fine with me. And then the same with the guy sleeping, because, I could see his hands, so I was fine with that. As long as I could see them, I was fine. So then when they all did that and I saw the three in the back were, like I said, the guy that was sitting on the passenger rear, he acted like he was asleep, so I really had no dealing at this time with him. But the two, the male and the female, she kept that blanket up, and the male kept, I saw his hands. They were on his legs, on his thighs, on top of his thighs.
What was the demeanor of the backseat passengers?
Like they did not want to be there, is the best I can. I mean, they, not argumentative, nothing like that, but I could just tell, like, I was making them very uneasy. Like I said, nobody would look at me. Even when the male put his hands on his knees, he just started staring straight into almost like the back of the front seat, like nobody would look at me.
What happened next?
So then I went back to speaking to the driver, and I asked her what she was doing. I asked her, she handed me her license and registration. I explained to her that I was stopping her for window tint, but because I'd already had her take the keys out of the ignition, and I just, at this point, I didn't want that car to take off of me. I wasn't going to have her put those keys back in the ignition to check the tint meter. At that point, the traffic infraction that could wait. So I asked her what she was doing, and she told me she was bringing her some friends home, or to a house. And I asked her, so I followed up with, okay, well, what's her name? And I pointed, and at that point, I pointed to the front seat passenger, and let me back up. I looked at her license. It was Lori Richardson. Lori Latrice Richardson was the license that I had. So I said to Lori, I said, who is that person sitting next to you in the front passenger seat front? And she said, I know her name is, and she gave me a name like Cookie. And I said, I don't want a street name. I don't want a moniker. I want a birth name. What is her name? Who is she? And she said, I don't know. And I said, how long have you met her? And she said earlier today. Now, I could have interpreted that. I'd interpret that to mean she just met these people earlier in the day. That could have meant she was with them earlier. I don't know. Or that person next to her. So at that point, based on, she's scantily dressed, doesn't know who she's, with. And again, nobody is looking at me. They're all staring straight ahead. I asked her for her ID, and she gave it to me, and then I went back to the back, and I asked the person behind the driver. I basically went right in order with, I asked him, I handed him my notepad and a pen, and I said, I want you to legibly write your name and a date of birth on my notepad. And And so, and then once he did, I watched him do it. Then he handed it to the female that sat next to him. She did. And then she handed it, she started to hold it out like this to the guy that was sleeping, or, acting like he was sleeping. Still, he had not moved. So I said, hey, I need you to sign my notepad. I need your name and your date of birth. He didn't respond. So I asked him a second time, name and date of birth. He didn't respond. So then I said, man, are you okay? He didn't respond the third time. So I asked him a second, man, are you okay? He doesn't respond. So after 4 times, I tell him, I said, listen, if you don't respond the 5th time, I'm going to call the ambulance because you're a medical emergency in my eyes because, you're completely unresponsive. That's just, it's unreal. And so he opened his eyes and he looked at me and he told me, I hate cops. And I said, yeah, me too. Trying to elicit a response. Nothing. Nobody in the car laughed. Nobody. They all just stared straight ahead.
Well, I'm going to stop you there. Did you still have your eyes on the rear passenger who was behind the front passenger seat?
I did.
Did he move his arms in any way, any furtive movements?
No. He kept his hands on his thighs. She, the whole time next to him, had that blanket wrapped up like she was cold. And I mean, it was, it wasn't cold to me, but it could have been cold to her. I don't know. But she had it wrapped around her like she was cold right up to her chin. And then at this point, when the male said that and I said it back, he kind of looked like he was, aggravated. I woke him up. So he wrote a name down, and then I went back to my cruiser, and I called in. I let dispatch know that I was going to be calling 5 1029s, which are warrant checks.
Let me ask you this. Why did you make the comment, I don't like cops either?
Well, because of that reason, I did that. I've used that comment many times throughout my career, and usually it's calmed down the biggest, the most out of control, because it's like that you kind of like, it almost like throws a curveball at them. So you kind of like, look at me, and it's worked most of the time. I get some response out of it. And usually, surprisingly, it's calmed down some pretty aggravated people because they look at me like, what, or they laugh, and, so that was why.
When you had the individuals write down their names, you started in the rear driver's side?
Yes, I did, yes.
And then it went to the female?
In the middle.
And then it ended with the guy who was pretending to sleep who didn't like cops, he said?
Yeah, that's correct. And he was behind the front passenger seat.
And when you went back and you said you were going to run for warrants, did you do anything else during that period of time?
I did.
Before we go further, do you have a dash cam on your vehicle?
No, I do not.
Did you have your white light on?
I did.
And what is a white light?
Well, I had the top, as I said, I guess they're called floodlights or something, but I didn't have my red and blues activated. Because it was well-lit area and I didn't need it, so I had my floodlights on.
What did you do next then?
So as I was running them, before I ran them, I let dispatch know that I was going to be running 5 warrant checks, but before I let them know, after I did that, I checked our screen to see who was available that could come down and help, head my way. And at that time, the only person on our squad that was free was Trooper Alfano. The other squad was out on the streets, and I went on a back channel, or we call it car to car, and I asked Trooper Alfano, I said, hey, do me a favor. I said, will you head down this way? I said, I got 5 in a vehicle. And he said, sure. The reason I did that is, like I said, we were double squatted that night, and if I had gone over dispatch, what I was afraid of is the other squad, they had a few newer officers on, like fairly out of the academy or out of training. And what I did not want is I did not want somebody showing up, lights and sirens or lights blaring, because I did not want to get that car spooked. I just wanted to keep it where it was when I was there, so.
Why was this different than earlier in the night, your contact with the woman with the quashed warrant?
She was, as I used to joke with people when I stopped, they're the only contact generally I had all night. So I used to, I just make small talk with people. you know, just because I wasn't a big ticket writer, so I always try to put people at ease, like, look, this is what I did. You know, I'm out here looking for criminal activity. I'm not, you know, I'm not really looking for speeding tickets, especially on the midnight shift. That wasn't really, I didn't think it was my primary goal. DUIs, you know, so me and her had a, you know, brief conversation. It was jovial, and she went on our way, you know. I don't remember it, so that was a good thing.
You remember this?
Oh, absolutely. I'll never forget this.
Did you write a report in this case?
No, I did not.
Is that typical for people who are involved as victims in the case?
That's correct.
Have you read police reports in this case?
Other than my transcript, no.
When you say a transcript, there was a transcript of an interview that you gave right after you were shot.
Oh, at the hospital, yes, correct. The transcript I gave the detective at the hospital, I read over that.
And did you read over the transcript of the interview that you gave to Jan Butcher shortly after going through surgery too?
That's correct, yes.
But other than that, have you reviewed other people's police reports?
No, I've learned a lot of stuff for the first time ever, unfortunately, you know, being here.
Let's talk about what happened when you ran the 3 names in the back.
Okay.
And tell us when Trooper Alfano arrived and Trooper Cruz arrived.
Okay. So when I ran, it was just like how I ran people is just in the same order of vehicle, because like when we do collision reports, it's the same thing. You almost want to put people in the same place of the car, so that way it just makes your paperwork life easier. So I started with the first ID I had, which was Lori Richardson. I ran her name through our computer, Arizona MVD, and she came back. Her plate was good, meaning her registration was active, her driver's license was active, and she had current insurance. The second ID I ran was the front seat passenger, and that was Vanessa Martinez, and she came back. She wasn't driving, but she was, I would call it active, no warrant, so she had no warrants or wants. The person behind Lori Richardson gave me the name of Johnny Ruiz, and that name came back. I believe it was no record found, or it was something it wasn't matching up. It was a false name. Okay, the female sitting next to that person gave me the name of Valeria Jaime. That name came back, no warrants, no wants. And then I don't recall the male that was sleeping, the name he gave me. That came back, no record found either. I have if I can just review that, I'll remind you.
Exhibit 12, great. Is exhibit, what's been admitted as exhibit 7, is that your notepad that you were using that evening, sir?
That's correct. Yes, it is.
I now have exhibit 12 up on the screen.
And
The social security number that's written across the top, is that related to anything involved in this case?
no, it's not.
And would you frequently,
And how I can decipher that, so you know, if you look at that 527, the weird writing, that's my writing, because my twos are very distinguishable. That's 527 right there, 9802. So if you see right below that where Johnny Ruiz, the handwriting is different. So, and the same with the very top. It wasn't uncommon for me to hand my notepad to people, especially on the night shift, so it could have my writing or others' writing. So that's those 3 names below that social security number unrelated, as the same as that one above it. And Richard Aguilar was the name the person behind the front seat passenger gave me. And then, okay, so I forgot.
So what
at
did
that
you
point,
learn with the records check?
yeah, hey, and Trooper Cruz. Okay, so as I was running the names, as the fifth name, the Aguilar name, Richard Aguilar, came back, no record found. At that point, Trooper Cruz had arrived on scene. He walked up to my vehicle. I rolled my passenger front window down because I was still sitting down by the computer. And he asked me what I had, and I told him I had 5 in the vehicle. I said they were very suspicious, and I said the 2 males in the rear were giving me false names. And I explained to him that the person on the driver's side, passenger, was basically acting like he was asleep, so I was going to deal with the one in the passenger, the driver's side front first, and then I would get to that guy. So as I was talking to him, and I was actually in my car, at that point Trooper Alfano arrived, and he caught up to Trooper Cruz and myself, and we explained to him what was going on, 5 in the vehicle, suspicious, and 2 giving false names. So, and I explained to him I was going to deal with the person on the driver's side, rear seat, that male first, and then that other male second.
When you went back to the car, where did Trooper Alfano and where did Trooper Cruz go, if you remember?
I do. Trooper Cruz walked over to the passenger rear of the vehicle. Trooper Alfano, he walked to the, Trooper Cruz walked to the passenger side rear of the vehicle. Trooper Alfano walked to the rear of the vehicle and eventually wound up sliding over a little towards the passenger side, or on the driver's side, my side of the vehicle, and I walked to the rear driver's side of the vehicle. So I was now looking into the rear passenger window, talking to the male.
Which male were you talking to?
The name that he gave me?
No, were you talking to the person behind the driver's seat?
That's correct.
And what was, tell us what was said.
So I went up to him, and then so I can set it up. The driver, Lori Richardson, she's got her hands on the steering wheel. Vanessa Martinez, she's got her hands on her knees. The male had his left hand on his knee or on his thigh, and his right hand I did not see his right hand. The female, she was still wrapped in the blanket tied up to her chin, and the male on the passenger rear, he was still laying on the window.
Could you still see his hands?
I could still see both his hands.
So did you say anything now when you went back to the vehicle?
I did. I looked at that male, the Johnny Ruiz, or the name he gave me, Johnny Ruiz, and I told him that he was giving me a false name, and he told me he wasn't, and I told him he was, and I told him that he wasn't going to go anywhere. I said if he's going to keep giving me a false, and I told him, I tried to give him the, look, if you just got traffic warrants, you can potentially going to make this a lot worse, because and usually that was most of the time on midnights. We got a lot of petty traffic warrants or small misdemeanor warrants. And, and I explained to them, if they gave me a false name, what I was going to do, I would take him down, detain him, bring him to the station, and I was going to have we have crime lab people, they come and fingerprint them. And then I warn them that, and there's a sign in our booking room that talks about forgery. And I tell them they're going to sign that name, their fingerprint card as, well, in this case, it would have been Johnny Ruiz. And when his fingerprints come back on file to who he truly is, then I'm going to charge him with forgery because it's a government document.
Did you have that conversation?
I did.
With your passenger?
I did.
What happened next?
He told me that was him, and so I said, okay, let me have your social security number. I'll run it that way. And he said, what? I said, your social security number. I said, let me have your social security number. I'll run you that way. And so he said 6. And then he said, when he said 6, I started to lean in because it sounded like he was giving me something. And he said 0. And I heard 0. And the next thing I heard was an explosion. And as I've said, I always thought it spun me completely around, but it spun me The last thing I remember is I saw Trooper Alfano, and he had a look of terror on his face, and I don't remember anything after that. I just went down.
Did you hear additional gunshots?
I didn't hear anything.
Tell us what you remember happening next.
I remember, Ray, or Trooper Cruz, Ray, I saw him, I remember him straddling me, and I remember I was looking up at him, and he kept saying, Casey, Casey. He's like, you okay, you okay? And I remember he told me that I had been shot. And I was making a mental note not to touch my face because I was afraid if I put my hands in my face, I'd feel a gaping hole and I would go into shock and die. I remember he kept saying that, and I remember when I was looking down, all I could see, the two things that I remember seeing the legs of two blue uniforms running my way, which would probably be Phoenix police officers. And I remember one of them, I just remember one of them laying there, and he was like just shaking me and telling me, don't let that scumbag kill you, hang in, So, can we continue?
What were you feeling?
I wasn't feeling anything. I think I was in shock. I remember, the next I remember, I remember we were on the way to I was in the ambulance, and I saw, that they were cutting my shirt, and I thought they were cutting my vest. So I think I said, but I'm sure my mouth was filling up with blood. In my mind, I told the guy, I remember I grabbed his arm and he looked at me and I said, don't cut my vests, they're expensive. I thought I said that. And then I remember I didn't want to spit on the ambulance floor because I didn't want to get it dirty, but my mouth was just filling up with blood.
Did you have a hard time breathing?
I did. So I started, I remember when I leaned over and I was hanging over and I was just letting the blood run out of my mouth. I mean, it really started dawning on me that I'm dying. I just didn't think I was going to make it. And so a book I read 20 years ago in the military talked about, it was a story, a guy had got shot, it's a true story, a guy got shot in the back of the head, and the guy had talked about doing multiplication tables. And I'd keep his mind going. How I remember this, I don't know. But I couldn't do multiplication tables, so what I was doing is, I remember I was just staring at the ground, and I was just putting people's heads, their pictures in my head. I was thinking of my wife, and I was saying their name, my mom, and I was saying, Mom. I'd see a picture of my dad, I'd say, Dad. My brother, I'd say, Tim, I was just trying I was just trying to think. I was like, if I go down and go out, I'm dead. I will never wake up. I remember they wheeled me into the hospital, and I remember I was looking under the bright lights in the ER, and they were squeezing me and asked me, do you feel this, do you feel that? And the only thing I had trouble was numbers, because they'd ask me what time it was, and the date and time, I knew I was in a hospital. I knew I was in Phoenix, but my numbers I could not, for some reason I couldn't remember numbers.
What happened at the hospital? What efforts were made to save your life?
Okay, from what I've learned, that night, I believe it was 2 surgeries. I think Dr. Burrow told me it was about 9.5 hours total. They had the bullet had hit my bone and shattered. Luckily, I was lucky it hit my bone because I probably wouldn't be here if had it not. It hit my bone and shattered because it was ball ammo, full metal jacket. So it's dead, that's ball. So when it hits a solid object, it explodes, where mushroom would have mushroomed out and taken everything back. So anyhow, what Dr. Burrow said, the first one was, so I lost all my teeth up on the top left. I had a hole in my mouth that you could fit a golf ball through. I had lost all my bone. It's now titanium. The bullet, and then Dr. I'm drawing a blank on his name. I shouldn't. Patel, that was here the other day. When he was saying they're having trouble controlling the bleed, what Dr. Burroughs had explained to me is the bullet fragments had severed the maxillary artery and just missed the carotid. So as he said, had it gone just like less than the end of your fingernail further, I wouldn't be here. It would have severed my carotid artery. So that was what they're having trouble controlling, that bleed.
How many surgeries have you had?
Surgeries and medical procedures all said in total 17. After getting out of the hospital the first week, I've had bullet fragments removed from both eyes.
Did you almost lose your vision?
I did. After I got out of the hospital, I was sitting watching football that Sunday night, and I had told my wife, I said, man, my left eye doesn't feel right. And this was in the afternoon. By the late game, it felt like somebody was trying to push the left eye out of my head. It hurt so bad. And when I went to the hospital, they told me that the bullet fragments were starting to move towards my cornea, that had I not caught that, I probably would have lost my eyesight. From there, I had...
We'll talk about it more. One of the questions that I'd like to ask is, was everything taken out of you?
No, there wasn't. And the reason I still have bullet fragments next to the maxillary and carotid arteries. The reason for that was the doctor said the risk outweighed trying to attempt to take those out because they were so close to the arteries. So.
And can those continue to move in your body even to this day?
No, I was very concerned about that. I asked about that, but they said no, because they said the scar tissue would encapsulate them, because I was afraid maybe they would sever the artery at a later date, but they said the scar tissue would encapsulate them and they wouldn't move. The downside of it, a very huge downside of it, is I can never have an MRI again. So if I have a stroke, which I have had 2 small TIAs because of all this, I don't know what the TIA is, a mini stroke, but again, because I cannot have an MRI, because the MRI it's moved those fragments and sever my arteries, it's going to be something that I'm going to have to deal with.
I should have asked a better question. So they can move under certain conditions, correct?
Oh yeah. And so after my eyes, I had to go and have, they call it debreeding, and they would have to slice my jaw, or my gum line, and they would take out pieces of bone, teeth, and bullet fragments. I did turn the bullet fragments in my eyes to the detectives, so they did have that one.
What about stitches and different surgeries have you had?
So to close the roof, I had a dental plate. Well, before that, so just to give you an idea, for the first 3 months I was out of the hospital, I had a steady diet of Ensure. I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink. It's all. Then when I finally was cleared to eat or drink, that was before I had the dental piece. I'd have to be very cautious, especially if I went out, because the minute I'd eat or drink, it'd run out of my nose. So that was very tough.
Was it hard socially in dealing with these injuries?
Oh yeah, because to this day I have no feeling in this part of my face. So a lot of times I'd have to ask my wife, is my nose running, or is am I drooling? I couldn't feel it, and it was just very, it was uncomfortable. Okay, so then after that I had and then the mouth surgery to close the hole in the roof of my mouth. What they did is they had to graft the roof of my mouth skin right to left and just patch it over that way, and they stitched it, and 155 stitches. And as I've put into perspective, you've had a wisdom tooth out, that's 4 stitches. You know how bad that hurts. 155, I couldn't sip water for 4 days. I was to the point where they would have to admit me into the hospital because I was so dehydrated, it hurt so bad. Then they started working on my nose. They had to rebuild they just had to build the whole left side of my nose back. So I went to ENT doctor, ear, nose, throat doctors. And then the scar on my forehead right here is plastic surgery. And that was Dr. Manic, and basically had to put a stock. It was, I believe, 5 or 6 surgeries, but it just looked like a finger. It was a stock that had to sit to the left of my nose like that, and I had to wear it keep that for 3 months, and the reason for it was to create a blood supply, because again, it's titanium, and I don't have bones, so the blood had to. So after that created the blood supply, he used the back of my ear to create a nostril. And like I said, that was about 5 or 6. And those are surgeries, but, throughout the course of doing this, I mean, I caught MRSA in a hospital, and that's bad infection. So, I had to be quarantined when I go to the hospital. It was tough. It was tough.
I want to talk to you about when you met with Detective Tony Mraz on October 10th in the afternoon, right after this. I'm sorry, October 9th in the afternoon, right after this.
Ms. Dahl,
Yes.
how long is this line of questioning?
Judge, I think it'd be a good time to take a break.
Okay. We're going to take our 15-minute break. Please remember the admonition applies. We'll see you in about 15 minutes. Thank you.
All rise for the jury.
Please be seated. We'll be back on the record at 3:12. The witness stand. Thank you.
All right.